Manila Chamber. My name is Matt O'Malley. I am the District 6 City Councilor and the Chairman of the Committee on Environment, Sustainability and Parks, as well as the Chairman of the Committee on Healthy Women, Families and Communities. We have a number of grants to talk about at today's council hearing. We're beginning with docket number 0866, which is a grant of $350,000 under the Environment, Sustainability and Parks Committee. I will read into the record the docket, which reads, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend in the amount of $350,000 in the form of a grant for the Boston Digital Archaeology Project awarded by the National Endowment for the Humanities to be administered by the Environment Department. The grant will fund salary for an this grant will fund salary for an archaeologist to collect data and digitized findings and make them accessible to scholars and the general public. We are joined by my dear colleague and friend, the District 2 City Councilor Ed Flynn. For those who may be in the chamber, this is a public hearing. We ask you to silence your cell phones, take conversations outside, please. If anyone would like to testify, they may do so by signing up in the on the sign-up sheet to my left, close to the door. I want to remind everyone that this is a public hearing being recorded and broadcast on Comcast 8, RCN 2, Verizon 1964, as well as streamed digitally at boston.gov/city-council-tv. We're going to get right into it with Joe Bagley, the city's archaeologist. But before I turn to Mr. Bagley, Councillor Flynn, did you have any opening comments?
Well, thank you, Councillor Malley, and thank you for your work on this important issue for many years. I just want to, I'm interested in hearing the comments from Joe in a minute, but I had the opportunity to work closely with Joe during the Chinatown dig over the summer, and I was with them maybe 8 or 10 times over the summer, and I can attest to the hardworking and professionalism and determination. And what I liked about Joe and your attitude, Joe, is you wanted people involved, you wanted people included, whether they were working for the city or not, but you reached out to school districts, you reached out to tourists, you were a great welcoming person for the city. You represented the city well during that archaeology dig in Chinatown. It may not have went the way we wanted it to go, but I saw firsthand your professionalism and outstanding hard work of you, the team, the volunteers that really came from all parts of Boston. So, so I'm looking forward to hearing from your testimony, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Mr. Bagley, welcome. It's great to be with you again. Did you have any opening statements, or do you want to just get right into some of the specifics of the grant?
Sure. I was just going to give a brief overview
Please,
of the project.
that'd be great.
So the funding that we received from the National Endowment for Humanities, first of all, it was a very competitive grant. It was a national grant. We were one of only a few dozen awardees, and we tied for the largest grant award in the country, along with other notable institutions, including Yale and the Getty Museum. So it's a real great acknowledgement by the federal government and by this funding agency, acknowledging the work that we've done, but also our techniques and our policies for archaeological collections work. The funding will digitize 5 archaeological sites that have been excavated since the 1980s and 1990s. They're part of our legacy collections, work that is difficult to process without additional funding, because of all the work that we do each year creates a workload that we can satisfy with our current staffing, but it's difficult to go back to our older collections and get them up to modern standards for both archaeology and for research and historians. The 5 sites included are Boston Common, Faneuil Hall, portion of Faneuil Hall, Brook Farm, Paul Revere's house, and a 19th century brothel in the North End, just to kind of round out the topics. We have approximately 210,000 artifacts that will be included in this grant, although the exact number is unknown because as part of this project, the collections have not been formally cataloged. So we will be creating a team of people who will go through every individual artifact, identifying what they are, cataloging them digitally into a spreadsheet, and then creating that data and putting that data online to be accessible to the general public, We'll also be photographing all of the archaeological collections as part of this grant and putting photos online. And then we already have an agreement with the Commonwealth Museum at the state's office in the archives building to create individual exhibits on each one of these collections. So there'll be approximately a one-year exhibit. That's kind of still in the works, is exact timing, for each of these 5 sites. In addition, a permanent online exhibit and a searchable database so that the public will be able to see what we've got. Frankly, I will be able to see what we have in these collections for the first time ever in the history, since they've been dug up, most of them 20 to 30 years ago. And I'm also very happy that they represent multiple neighborhoods in the city. It's not just downtown sites, but including the North End, downtown, and West Roxbury.
That's great. That's great. So I'm familiar, of course, with the Common, Faneuil Hall, Brook Farm, the Revere House. Where is this 19th century brothel in the North End?
27 to 29 Endicott Street. It was a bustling neighborhood prior to the construction of the raised highway through downtown. It was one of the many properties between what we consider the North End and downtown today that were demolished as part of the original construction of the raised highway. During the Big Dig project, there was multiple archaeological surveys that happened downtown, especially along the Rose Kennedy Greenway. Today, the site is kind of in a small pocket park in between the Rose Kennedy Greenway and Endicott Street, where it starts today. And it was an 1840s, 50s, and 60s brothel.
Yeah. What was it called? Do you know? Did it have a name?
It was, the madam that ran it was, her last name was Lake, but there was 3 madams that ran it over the course of the history. A woman from BU just finished her dissertation on the project, and she's in the process of publishing her results, but we're going to be digitizing the collections to couple with her dissertation.
That's great.
And she focused on the sensory aspects of the site, so sight, sound, smells, feelings, and it's a remarkable collection. It was an outhouse with many nearly intact ceramics and glass and shoes, hygiene things. It's going to be one of the more visually engaging sites because everything is nearly intact.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And then Brook Farm, obviously, is in my district. I know it well. There's a great group that's formed, the Friends of New Brook Farm, who I know are looking to sort of bring it back to its once glory. Has there been any talk, I know that's close to the city archives, has there been any talk about maybe having an exhibit? So you're going to have these exhibits at the Commonwealth Museum, which is terrific, but what about taking advantage of the libraries, maybe showing some of the things? I'm thinking the West Roxbury Library, for example, would be such a wonderful, high-trafficked place to see some of the findings from just up the road at Brook Farm.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the goals with this, with the design of the exhibits, is for that to not necessarily be taken down and disappeared. At the very least, we hope to have the exhibits returned back to the City Archaeology Laboratory. However, they could go elsewhere. And one of the ideal places would be the library. We're not trying to make them so large that they're difficult to find other places to put the exhibits up again after they come down. And we're also going to be designing it so that it can be both artifact-based and panel-based. So if there's a location that can't hold artifacts on exhibit, the panels themselves will have a visual representation of the site, so that may be slightly more flexible for where that can end up, including libraries, although libraries typically have exhibit space as well. So it's the start of the project is the archives, the State Archives, Commonwealth Museum, and then from there it can go pretty much anywhere.
That's fantastic. That's great. So $350,000 is the total amount of the grant?
Yes.
And does that fund any, hire any supplemental staff to help you?
Yes, it does.
How many positions?
There'll be 2 positions, a project archaeologist who will be responsible for the sorting and cataloging phase of things, and a digital archaeologist who will be responsible for the photography, the website, and the database aspects. We're also working with UMass Boston. We're nearly completed an MOU with them to have 2 graduate assistants from UMass Boston, one of the who will be working on the design and implementation of the exhibits, an archaeologist and a public historian working collaboratively from their 2 perspectives to ensure that we represent the archaeological story, but also the documentary and the narrative of the story well. And they will be primarily focusing on the exhibit and the deliverables. And we're very pleased that UMass Boston was able to use the funding that we're submitting for the graduate assistants to get tuition waivers for the students that are receiving the graduate assistantship. So in addition to the funding that this grant is providing, they will also be receiving free tuition.
That's great.
Yes.
That's amazing. So, and it's 1-year grant?
It's a 2-year grant.
2-year grant. Okay. So, and for those, who may not be as familiar, you've been essentially a one-man show for many, many years
Yes.
of service to the city, and you do exceptional work.
Thank
so
you.
I'm very grateful that this is going to give you some needed support. Not that you've been lacking in your job. If anything, you've been doing more with less for many, many, many years. But this, I think, will help really give you a robust team to deal with so many important issues of our identity, of our history, and to share it in such a way with the public is what really intrigues me. So I love that you're open to and encouraging the idea of having a rotating sort of show on the road of this and some of your other work. I think in our libraries and perhaps the community centers is a great thing that we can take from this. So that's all I have. Do you have any questions specifically, Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Malley, and I just want to follow up on a couple points. I know Councillor Malley hit it perfectly. When the exhibit is ready at the appropriate time, if we are able to share that artifacts and provide some education through the library system, I think that'd be a great opportunity for the residents of Boston. So I would join my colleague, Councillor O'Malley, in highly recommending if we can continue working with the public library system on such a proposal. That'd be exceptional. Can you give me a little background on the Boston Common site?
Sure. So the primary collection from Boston Common was excavated in 1986 as part of the Boston Common Lighting Project.
Yeah.
Essentially, if you go out to the Common today, everywhere that you see a light pole was an archaeological test unit back in the mid-1980s. It was a dig executed by my predecessor, Stephen Pendry, as part of the City Archaeology Program, working with the Parks Department. It produced about 100 boxes of artifacts, which is approximately 80,000 artifacts, so that we will have an exact number in about 6 to 9 months. It represents one of the most intact archaeological landscapes that remain downtown in Boston. There's been a lot of modifications to the Common, but in essence, it remains essentially the way it looked in 1630. Comparatively to other parts of the city. So in addition to having very important and almost unique Revolutionary War encampment sites, which otherwise have been lost due to development over the years, we have a Revolutionary War encampment. It has two very intact Native American sites that represent the history of Boston prior to 1630. And we have a very strong working relationship with the Massachusetts tribe, whose ancestors would have been contributing these artifacts, in addition to the Nipmuc and the Wampanoag. And so the collection is quite large and very diverse and represents approximately 7,000 years of history, although most of the artifacts are 19th century, Victorian and later.
That's excellent. I'd be interested in learning more about that project. I know you mentioned there might be some Native American artifacts on the Boston Common that would, I think the public would love to see that and learn about that. I think that's one group that, I think we need to do a better job of telling their story, the incredible contributions they have made to our city, to our country. I mean, you look at the Navajo code talkers during World War II. I mean, those were the bravest soldiers, airmen that we had, and they really didn't get the public recognition for so many years up until recently. So South Boston actually used to have a Native American community going back 70 or 80 years. And so this is something that I would like to learn more about if we can stay in contact on that
Absolutely.
particular issue. And can you just give me a little bit of background information on what you have accomplished on the Faneuil Hall site?
Sure. So we're in the process of starting up the CPA-funded grant. We're still working out the exact details of how the funding is going to be distributed. So that one's not having started yet. Both these projects haven't started yet. So
Okay.
There's two separate Faneuil Hall collections, one from 1991 and one from 2010. So the CPA funds are going to be addressing the 1991 collection, which is primarily from underneath Faneuil Hall, and the 2010 collections will be part of this NEH grant, which is a collection beside Faneuil Hall. So slightly different locations, essentially a similar story being represented by both collections, though.
Some of those artifacts going back to the American Revolution?
Many of them are, yeah. Essentially, the entire collection is late 17th to 18th century. Almost nothing from the 19th century or later included in that collection, and it represents, between the two collections, about 120,000 artifacts. Many of which are quite large and visually engaging because they represent items that were coming in as part of the transatlantic trade. And then if things broke, they were thrown immediately into town dock in order to basically just make them go away because they were no longer saleable. So the collections from that collection should be both interesting from an historic perspective, but also engaging from a visual perspective as well, which is important.
Excellent. No, I just want to say thank you, Joe, for the great work that you are doing. I saw you all summer working hard in Chinatown, and I appreciate the sweat and the hard work and determination that you've put in over the summer on that site in Chinatown. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. We've been joined by my dear colleague and friend, the District 7 Councillor Kim Jani. Welcome, Councillor Jani. This is the first of our 3 hearing orders. This is Docket 866, which is, we're joined by City Archaeologist Joe Bagley. Did you have any questions?
No, not at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Jani. I have no further questions, Mr. Bagley, other than to say I love your book and read it, and thank you for sharing with us, and it's really important. The great work you do, so it goes without saying I'll be enthusiastically asking my colleagues to vote favorably on this at our next meeting on September 11th, and look forward to just being kept abreast of the great progress that you're making. I think it's a really exciting, and congratulations on winning this grant.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Of course, thank you. Joe Bagley, City Archaeologist, do we have any folks wishing to testify on this issue? Seeing none, I will hereby adjourn Docket 0866. Mr. Bagley.